Hello and welcome to the Gambling Files podcast, the podcast that has somebody working with a chainsaw fairly close by. I'm one of your hosts, John Bruford, with your other host, Fintan Costello. Fintan, hello.
Hello, John.
So, how's it going?
Good. Busy day, busy week, lot going on.
Yeah,
Usual.
I hear you.
You know me.
Yeah. I've been studying how to be a top executive. Not just, I thought I might be able to do it by osmosis, by, just doing a podcast with you. But it turns out there's more to it than that.
Really?
Yeah. There's techniques and all sorts of shit, and people are selling courses to learn them. There's fucking loads of them. My favourite people that sell courses are the people that sell courses in how to be a writer. And these people are not successful writers, they're successful course sellers.
Wow, that's those you can do, those you can't teach, right?
Yeah, they also, I bumped into a bunch of them on Substack, and it turns out they don't like criticism or people telling them they're selling fucking snake oil. They're actually quite sensitive. So maybe they are truly artists. Maybe I've judged them badly.
Could be.
Fucking charlatans.
Mm.
See, Finton's just demonstrated a fantastic sponsorship opportunity there.
Bottom of the mug. I was just thinking that.
It's an M&S mug.
It is. It is. Very
And
old
we all know that now.
We've had these since the Isle of Man. So we should have a big sticker there. Well, we've always said that,
Yeah, but nobody's taken us up on it. I mean, it's a very affordable bit of real estate. There's fuck all going on in there.
What was that? There was one of those original online casinos who always did these like crazy marketing stunts where they, paid a woman to get the logo tattooed or named their child after the brand. And what are they called?
Yeah, I do remember.
Golden Palace or something like that. Was it Golden Palace?
Maybe.
I think it was.
Certainly one of those where they would get loads of coverage in lads mags and things as a result.
Yeah, we need we need some of the crypto sites to really step up.
We need somebody really mental.
And rich.
Yeah.
More money than sense. That's what we look for in a sponsor.
I think we're in the right industry.
We are.
But our current sponsors are not like that.
No.
And I don't want anybody thinking that we're implying.
Rude, smart, hardworking, good-looking, conscientious lovers, the whole shebang.
I mean, don't even get started.
So conscientious. I've never felt so well looked after.
Yeah. They're really fully aware that there are two people in that particular transaction.
Sometimes more than two. Who knows?
I've heard of such things. So we're just it's IGB. Is it next week or the week after?
Next week.
Very much
next week. Very much next week.
Man, that came really fast.
Did.
And you're going to be there.
I am.
I don't think I'm going to be there.
I'm going to be there.
I'm a little bit gutted. I am gutted. I don't think I'm going to be able to be there. I can't afford the cash money. I can't afford the time at the moment. So much going on.
Mm.
So do you remember, so last time we had Leo on, right?
Yep, we did.
He sent us some stuff afterwards that we've been talking about in the episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I finally, because I leave emails left unread that I want to come back to at a later date, I finally got to that email.
Like 6 months later.
Yeah.
I'm sure we had Leo on as like a New Year's resolutions thing or something.
Gonna say my inbox is a bit of a biohazard. And I read his, because it was, the stuff was appropriately enough. It was about time management.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow. The development area, is it?
I think we can call it that, yes. And but it was fantastic. It's
Hmm.
really, really good, and it's had a big influence already. I only read it on Tuesday. I haven't watched the
Leo,
videos yet, but it was
Leo is
excellent.
amazing. I do exec coaching with him, and I'm part of his mastermind group, and it's brilliant. It's
It's
some
not like
proper
so
inner
so
circle.
so so
Go
years ago, right? I've probably mentioned this before on the podcast, but you've probably forgotten because it was so long ago.
Is it M&M or QVC?
It is QVC related.
Go on.
Where it was it was about the QVC difference, where they would take a bunch of staff, but make sure that none of the staff work together in any site. So a bunch of people who don't know each other,
Hmm.
and you go, and it was like a team building thing, and get into the core values of the brand and all that jazz. Very, very American approach, American
Sure.
parent company, obviously.
But it works, is the stupid thing. You're a bit like, oh, this is a bit shit, but
Well,
it genuinely works.
yeah,
Oh,
no,
no, did
no.
you just rebel? Did you like,
Oh no,
I
no.
am the
They
square
asked me
peg?
on it. They asked me on it, and I said, "There's absolutely no point. You don't want me on it. You really don't. It will be like a Clockwork Orange, but the ending will be very different." um. So yeah. So they do all this, but they made two fundamental mistakes with their
No,
British teams. Right.
go on.
First one is it was free bar all weekend.
All weekend. Jesus.
Guy I know was found having nobody had seen him after the first night. He was found in his room shivering naked, cuddling the television. True story. um, but the other thing is that there was like they did like a confession thing, and I wish I could remember this guy's name now, but he was the top man at QVC UK.
Confession.
Sorry.
They did a confession thing?
Yeah, yeah, and he always kicked it off, but he was trying to kick it off with great impact and something really personal about him. And he kicked it off by telling this assembled group of lagered up fucking Brits that he hadn't lost his virginity until he was 26.
Oh, Jesus.
I mean, you say this works as a team building thing. All anybody's doing now is getting shit faced drunk and taking the piss out of the CEO.
So you are a wanker.
It's just like so.
Wow.
I think it's flawed.
I've worked for companies that have done this, and you do have to turn off a certain part of your brain and just embrace it. So that natural cynicism, you've just got to leave at the door. And it does, like it does, they do work. Um,
They used to have posters up in QVC. In fact, it was the first time I'd ever seen one of these posters. They had "Be Here Now" posters on the walls.
it's like, was that an Oasis song?
This was long before the Oasis album.
Okay.
This is a US kind of motivational thing.
Oh,
Be present.
I always like those other ones. Like the anti-motivation ones. They were always pretty funny.
I do love those. Demotivational posters are
That's
fantastic.
it. Yeah.
I need some of those for. And
Mm.
there's another sponsorship area potential.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Or
Maybe we
it's
should
just
talk to some of our existing sponsors and do some wallpaper. Huh?
logo up like a F1 driver. Patches.
Now you're talking.
Bit of watch sponsor. Yeah. Do that. Work.
Hey, I found a watch I like.
Nice.
Well, it's part of my top executive training that I'm doing. Because I have noticed top executives like watches.
They do.
Fair, it's a. Do you know what? I'm not going to tell you because you'll just scoff at me.
It's okay.
You just be like,
It's all right. If you like it, you like it. There's no wrong answer here.
nah, yeah, you say that, but I think if you see it, that your tone will change.
Is it Mickey Mouse?
No.
Snoopy?
Yes. It is. It's a Snoopy watch.
It's highly collectible, man. Highly collectible. You know, the
Is it?
Omega Snoopy. Yeah, the Omega Snoopy watches are very collectible.
I don't think it's Omega.
I know, but you get the point. Like, it can be. There's very expensive Snoopy watches out there.
I don't think this is a very expensive Snoopy. Well, it's expensive to me, but you know, it depends where you're looking from, doesn't it? I've got to find it. Do you mind
So,
if I
you know,
find
when
it?
I told you
It's
I
really
had
good.
13 minutes, I've now got one.
Okay, so Fintan, tell me about our sponsors.
We have amazing sponsors.
Oh,
We
we
have the
do.
one. We have the wonderful Optimove. Uh,
Keep going.
oh, uh, gaming industry's leading CRM software provider. They'll just optimize your shit. Simple as that. Majority of the industry use them. It's the thing to use. They can do this. They'll help you scale. They were doing AI before it was cool. They were doing big data, machine learning before it was cool. They're brilliant. Second amazing sponsor is OddsMatrix. Do you want a tier one sportsbook? They'll give you a tier one sportsbook. You want a tier one sportsbook localized for your market? They will give you a tier one sportsbook localized for your market. And they can also give you the casino and everything else that you need and the CRM and everything to run your business. Um, they're brilliant. Definitely get the demo, see how it works. And they've launched horse racing now in the UK, which I think is not a trivial thing. But they're doing billions in bets, all the markets. It's fantastic. It is a tier one product. Third sponsor is the wonderful Clarion and their upcoming IGB conference next week. I will see you in London, and give me a shout if you're going to be there. And it's London in the summertime. It's going to be fantastic, and it'll be lovely. So it's not too late to book a ticket and get yourself there. You're on mute, John.
Sorry, I muted it because I was typing, and I know how you feel about that.
I know.
It's a Timex Peanuts watch.
Nice. That's nice.
But it is nice.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, but
Who's our
it's the
guest?
fact that you guessed it was a fucking Snoopy watch. That bothers me. I'm going to go look for a Daffy Duck watch now because nobody will be expecting.
I can read you like a book, John. It's not War and Peace.
It's nothing challenging.
Who's our guest today, John?
Our guest is Melanie Ellis,
Oh,
returning
fantastic.
guest, and chat between me and Mel about what's going on in the UK, why things are taking so long, positives, negatives, good things, bad things.
That sounds brilliant.
It's that simple.
I
Well, it's
can't wait
Melanie,
to
you know. She's
She's
always
so
good
smart.
value. You don't need to
So
listen,
smart.
Fintan, because you're not even mentioned in the conversation, not once. It's not worth. No, don't do it, Fintan.
So no, I have
Save your
to.
feelings.
Brilliant. Look forward to it.
Yeah, Melanie Ellis. We are joined in this particularly fabulous episode. They're all fabulous in some way. By the esteemed Right Honourable Melanie Ellis, who's a partner at Northridge Law. Eagle-eared listeners and eyed these days will know that Melanie has joined us before, and for some reason has come back again. So that's good. Melanie, welcome. Thank you for joining. I nearly said us. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure you can refer to me as Right Honourable, but I'm definitely not in Parliament. But
Okay, I'll just say Your Honour when I address you then.
okay, no worries.
Thank you, Your Honour. And I'll gradually. I remember when I've had Judge Cheryl. I don't know if you're familiar with Judge Cheryl's fantastic works. We've had Judge Cheryl on the podcast. She created the diversionary court in Nevada. So
I'll have to look that episode up.
she's a wonderful person, and I'm a huge fan of hers. But I think we referred to her as Your Holiness.
Well, I hope I do.
She totally warrants it.
I hope I don't get that. You can go with Your Highness or something. That would be fine.
Okay, good to know. And I'll pass that on to Fintan when I see him. Look, next time Mel's on, it's Your Highness.
The smell is fine.
So there's kind of, so yeah, in the UK we've had this white paper hanging around like a spooky ghost in a Scooby-Doo cartoon for ages. You know, and it hasn't yet been unmasked as being the caretaker that's the villain. It's still hanging around like a spooky ghost, and everybody's like looking over their shoulder and going, "Ooh, it's a spooky ghost." Where are we at with this? Because it does feel like it's dragging right on.
Yeah, okay. I mean, we've had quite a few of the items from the white paper come into force in the last few months, I would say, or the last year. Maybe most recently, the stake limits for online slots have come in. And of course, we had the financial vulnerability checks last year as well. What else have we had recently? The statutory levy, of course, although it's not started being paid yet, it started sort of accruing from April. Direct marketing requirements came into force in May, where the customers now need to choose their products and channels to receive direct marketing. What else have we got? In October, we've got the requirement to sort of prompt customers to set their financial limits coming into force. So there, I guess, in terms of advertising, we had the codes of conduct from the sports governing bodies last summer as well. So yeah, quite a few.
That is quite a lot, isn't it?
Yeah, it's sort of happening gradually, isn't it? And
with the stake limits and all that, I mean, all of these things cause a great deal of consternation when they're announced.
Yeah.
Do you feel like it's kicked off since some of these were implemented, or do you think there's been a reasonably healthy acceptance?
No, I think operators, once they know that it's going to happen, at least then there's some certainty and they can start working to sort of actually implement them. And then by the time it comes into force, it's almost old news that's sort of been built in to their expectations. So, yeah, I mean, I think the sum total of everything is building up to quite a more restrictive picture in the UK than we had.
I think the emotion we're discussing here is resignation.
Yeah, maybe.
But it is one of those things, you know. I mean, I'm one of those people, like, I'm quite immediate, so I'm like a dog. And if something is set out in a certain way, I'll just go, oh, okay, so that's the way it is now.
Mm.
As opposed to, no, I want it to stay this way or whatever. So there's a point at which you've got to accept and say,
yeah,
well, let's move on with how it is now.
Exactly. Once it's been made into the LCCP or into legislation, that the point of challenging it is past. So it's just a case of accept it.
I was having a conversation with somebody this morning, a consultant in the industry, and a lovely and knowledgeable man. And he was saying that he was sort of explaining this in terms of, it wasn't really a conversation about semantics, but he was being critical of people who said that the 2005 Gambling Act was out of date. He said that because the Act isn't out of date, what the Act did was it gave the regulator greater flexibility to act.
Mm.
And I'm not being critical of the regulator. I'm not being critical of the present regulator, but it does feel as though, given how it was explained to me earlier, which was really nicely done, it does seem a bit odd that if the regulator's got all of this flexibility to create and adapt, that we're still so far behind technology. And I know regulation is always playing catch up, but it does feel like, because we're still miles behind smartphones. Do you know what I mean?
I suppose it depends what you mean by we're miles behind with smartphones. Like, certainly it's true that when the Gambling Act was introduced and smartphones weren't really a thing, well, I mean, maybe you could access the internet on your phone somehow, but it didn't really work very well. But I'm not sure how the Act would have been drafted differently if they had known about smartphones, I mean, it provides for remote gambling to be regulated and licensed, which is what we need. And I'm not too sure what else the Act could have done. And
Well, not talking about the Act itself necessarily, rather the over the intervening years that the regulator hasn't sort of grasped the nettle a little bit more. And, it's taken until now, really. And that does lie with the regulator. When you look at the Act and you accept that the Act is giving the regulator a ton of flexibility and power and control, it does seem odd that it's taken until this iteration of the Commission to really do something.
I think what I feel about that. I mean, I suppose, yes, it's very different now. People have effectively a casino and a betting shop in their pocket that they can use at any time, and I suppose that's the key difference. But in terms of what the regulator ought to be doing, but I mean, there's not something inherently wrong with that, as long as people are sort of able to use that in a safe way.
Which obviously they are.
I hope for the most part they are. And obviously nobody can deny that there are a minority of people who struggle with that. But yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not the legislator. I'm not the Gambling Commission, thankfully. I'm not sure what could realistically be done to entirely eliminate the issue for those people who struggle with that.
No, of course.
Completely taking away from everybody else.
Exactly. I mean, because you can't predict who is going to be affected, who is going to be injured, for want of a better word, it would mean absolutely throttling access for basically everybody. But no, I'm thinking more that it's and honestly, all regulators are behind the curve of technology because it's kind of a reactionary role, and I'm genuinely not being critical of them. I'm just saying it's a shame that it's taken us this long to get our shit in order, because while operators haven't necessarily been doing awful devious things, operators will always work will always set out to work to the letter of regulations. And so when things go awry, operators always get blamed. Just ask The Guardian.
For sure.
But some of the ire from people should be, and I'm not talking about the UK specifically, but some of the ire from people should be directed at regulators.
I mean, I do have sympathy for the Gambling Commission, because they can't just immediately react to things as well, because they have to go through their processes of consultation and make sure they're doing the right thing. And if they just immediately reacted, then they'd be criticised for taking steps, restricting things before they've actually gone through that process.
Be accused of a knee-jerk reaction.
So sort of damned if they do, damned if they don't, aren't they?
I was reading a really good article this morning. It was from 2022. It was an Andrew Tottenham article. And he was talking about the football index?
Oh yeah.
And the issues with the sort of perceived foot dragging that happened, and all of that got laid at the feet of the Gambling Commission when it wasn't theirs. And it's kind of, I do totally feel for them, because it is an utterly thankless job.
Mm-hmm.
But I do really feel that often a lot of the criticism that comes to operators should either also be or exclusively be at the foot of the regulator. But I'm not dissing anybody, Mel, because you know me. I'm a sunny, chirpy person, and I love everybody equally.
You would never criticise. Yeah, I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
I totally wouldn't.
I suppose this sort of question of what the Gambling Commission ought to do maybe takes us on to the whole question of affordability, what they've sort of tried to do in the past and what they're doing now.
But this is always contentious.
Yeah.
So where are we at?
Yeah, so it has been, and I'd say probably sort of maybe 5-6 years into the whole affordability question, but I think it really kicked off in 2020, if not slightly before, when the Gambling Commission published their enforcement report for the 2019-20 period, and this is when they first made it clear, I would say, that they felt that operators, they said if somebody's spending more than the national average, and I assume they meant national average disposable income by that, then the operator ought to be taking steps and getting evidence to make sure that they can afford that gambling. And there are a few other public statements from the Commission around that time. I think a good one was BGO Entertainment, which was in kind of late 2020. I don't think that one's available on their website anymore. It's kind of past its time limit. But in that public statement, the Commission was specifically saying that this operator hasn't taken into account customer affordability. And it specifically said other licensees ought to be considering the customer's affordability. And that should form part of their responsible gambling policy. So it was made pretty clear, I would say, in 2020 kind of time frame that operators needed to be doing affordability checks. But it was never, I wouldn't say it was ever really made clear what an affordability check ought to entail, other than I think in that 1920 enforcement report they did talk about asking customers to provide things like pay slips, P60s, and bank statements. But then I suppose a whole industry sprung up of people offering affordability checks for gambling operators. And it was never, I don't think it was ever clear whether that could take the place of asking for pay slips and bank statements, or what that type of affordability check ought to be telling the operator to meet the Commission's expectations. And then kind of in the whole time that to maybe 3 years following that, 3 or 4 years, during compliance assessments, the Commission would routinely be asking operators questions about what affordability checks have you done on this customer, or what evidence have you got that they could afford this level of gambling, about some of the top customers. And then these operators were being criticised, subject to special measures or even regulatory action if they hadn't got evidence that their customers could afford their gambling. So it's somewhat of a surprise now to hear the Commission saying we don't have any requirements for affordability checks in their recent blog post on the financial risk assessments pilot. Now, this is kind of a changed narrative, perhaps over the last year or so, that they've tried to move away from what they've said in the past. But I think the biggest problem from my perspective is that the Commission has never formally retracted what it has said in the past. And yes, things it said in enforcement reports and public statements are not part of the LCCP, they're not part of the legal requirements on an operator, but I think it was made very clear that operators had to do affordability checks, and we weren't all suffering from some sort of collective delusion about this. Operators were doing them because their license was at risk if they didn't do them. So I would like the Commission to make a very clear public statement to say, yes, we wanted you to do them in the past. No, we don't want you to do them anymore. You are now doing financial vulnerability checks, and you'll be doing financial risk assessments instead. And then I think that would save a lot of head scratching.
But are these processes wildly different, or are they just different words describing something that's really, really similar?
They are very different, actually. So the financial vulnerability check that's live for everybody at the moment is just a case of seeing if your customer's been made bankrupt, has any CCJs or sort of individual debt arrangements. That's a very different question from actually what is your monthly salary. Let's get evidence of that.
Yeah, what you're talking about, it's almost like a soft credit search, isn't it?
Yeah, it's not. I mean, it's not even that really. It's just has there been anything really bad happened, and then if there is, then we need to have a think about everything we know about this customer. And then the financial risk assessments will go a little bit further, and that is more of a credit search. But it's not fully clear yet, and I think there's been some inconsistency between the different credit providers in terms of what type of information they're actually giving back to the operators. So that really still needs to be bottomed out exactly what we're going to get back from a financial risk assessment. But again, it's not going to be what's this customer's monthly salary,
what's their inside leg
that they have. It's going to be what's on their credit file. Are they in financial risk according to, have they been missing payments on their debt and things like that. So yeah, this is pretty different from what has been done for affordability checks, what operators understandably thought they needed to do. But I think what we're still left with is the fact that if an operator knows that a customer is gambling beyond their means, they would still be expected to take action about that. So it's still not clear, I think, exactly what they should be doing. So, for example, if as part of perhaps an AML check, which was required, maybe the customer hit the €2,000 transaction threshold or some other reason, the operator then has to ask maybe for bank statements from the customer, and that makes it pretty clear they've got a certain monthly salary coming in, and then the operator sees that they're actually spending perhaps even more than that every month. They wouldn't be okay to just ignore that and say, oh, we don't have to do affordability checks anymore, because they have evidence in front of them that a customer is gambling more than their monthly salary, and that is very likely an indicator that they are suffering from some sort of gambling harm, or at least ought to trigger them to look into that. So then they would need to do an appropriate interaction. They need to decide what steps to take. But still, none of that is actually set out in the LCCP. It's to be interpreted from the customer interaction requirements.
Yeah, what I'm getting from what you're saying is that the thing that would be most appreciated is clarity.
Yeah, I think it would, and I can see why the Commission is reluctant, because they feel like if they set out exactly what their expectations are on this front, then it will be a race to the bottom. Everyone will just do that as the bare minimum, and then if perhaps a customer could slip through the net of exactly what they'd said, and perhaps they were clearly at risk of harm, but they didn't quite fit the criteria the Commission had said, and that operator said, oh, well, we did exactly what you told us to. So I think that's their fear, and maybe that's why they don't want to issue sort of a clear statement or just put something clearly in the LCCP. But I think it's still very difficult for operators to try and make sure they stay on the right side of the line, and understandably they don't want to be doing more than their competitors, because if they're asking for bank statements and the next guy isn't, then they're going to have customers complaining and they're going to lose customers. It's not fair that they would be doing that when someone else isn't.
Yeah. It does feel like a slightly funny situation, though. I mean, I totally get what you're saying, and the way you explained what the Commission might be thinking there, why that might be this approach, it does make perfect sense, logically and emotionally. But then, I kind of feel, I know I've just been saying that regulators should totally be blamed sometimes, But you do sort of feel like with regulators, damned if you do, damned if you don't.
I can understand why the Commission would feel like that, but I do think they've made a bit of a hash of this affordability thing. There's just been so much confusion, and when all the operators in the market are confused, then I think you have to blame the person that's caused that rather than the operator.
But good for lawyers in the space, presumably.
I don't know. That's the type of thing I want to be doing, is continually re-going over what you're supposed to be doing for affordability checks. But yeah, I would like some better clarity on that.
I'm sure it's on the way.
We'll see. We'll see. I think probably it'll be helpful once the financial risk assessments, once that can be sorted out. Hopefully we can have a consistent result from the different credit providers, and then those can be implemented for everybody. Then I think operators can, they know they've ticked that off. They've done the vulnerability check. They can certainly make sure that they are also aware of any other indicators in terms of the customer's play, but that they've perhaps got a slightly more structured set of checks that they need to be doing.
Is there a timeline on any of this? If officially?
No, there's not. So they've done the 3 pilot phases of the financial risk assessment, but they need to work, I think, now with the credit reference agencies to try and make it so they can be getting these consistent results, and that needs to be sorted out before they can bring them in. So I don't know exactly when it will be, but perhaps later this year.
Perhaps later this year.
I hope at least we'll hear something, perhaps in the autumn, with some final timeline.
Would you describe yourself as a glass half full kind of person?
I don't know. Maybe. It depends on the context, I would say.
I always describe myself as
empty.
It is. I always describe myself as a glass half full person, but there's always a caveat in which it glass is half full, but it's half full of piss.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think I'll probably give you the lawyer's answer that it depends on the context.
Okay. Yeah, I think everybody thought the white paper was going to bring clarity, but the affordability part of it, that is really fascinating and a little bit surprising, I must say.
Yeah. Because I think what we initially, because the Commission had started they've done their call for evidence on affordability checks, and we were expecting a proper consultation process from them, and then some clarity, which what we were expecting initially was you need to do an affordability check at this level of spend, and an affordability check means whether it's get the bank statements or the pay slips, something like that, so we'd know exactly what was needed. And then that never happened because there was the white paper review, and it sort of superseded it because the Commission, perhaps they were told, we'll deal with this in the white paper, you can leave it for now. But then what we got instead was a quite different process that hasn't addressed this question of, if you can see the customer's gambling in an unaffordable way, what should you do?
Yeah, quite. But, at least they can't gamble on credit cards.
Yes. And what we know about gambling on credit cards from the review that took place of this change is that stopping customers gambling on credit cards only prevents those who don't suffer from any sort of gambling disorder, problem gambling, from gambling on credit cards, because they actually found, I think it was a slight increase in gambling on credit for those who were in those sort of high PGSI score categories following the change. And I don't even really know if maybe they'd started gambling on black market size of it. So
Who knows?
who knows? And yeah, the Commission hasn't really sort of addressed those findings from the credit card evaluation, which is a shame. But
They'll be like, well, it doesn't matter because it's banned.
yeah, it's like we can't. Yeah, it would be very difficult for them to go back on that now, actually, and saying decided to reinstate gambling on credit cards at this point.
I've been doing some research for an article, and so I do. I begin articles with a question,
Okay.
and I don't start them assuming that I know the answer.
Okay.
And I've been researching this article about credit card bans, and about whether they are. I started off by phrasing it as a whether they are an emotional or a logical decision.
Okay.
And everything so far is pointing to it being kind of, and I'm not saying this about the Gambling Commission at all. In fact, I'm saying about other governments, definitely, but not actually about the Gambling Commission. I think with the Gambling Commission, it was an emotional decision, as in it was a choice based on emotion rather than logic, or rather than data. But I think it's also used as an appeasement to sort of critics of the industry, for regulators to look like they're doing loads, when in fact, a credit card ban is not a bad thing for the industry at all, because it makes up a very small amount of play, very, very small amount of play. It's a very complicated process because you can't put winnings back onto the card, etc., etc. There's a greater number of chargebacks where credit card play is used. So, I mean, for the industry, it's win-win. It's like when these things, because I do remember it all kicking off when the credit card ban was mooted and then put into place, and people went mental. Like, people in the industry went absolutely batshit.
Yeah, I think there was an expectation that it would reduce revenues probably more than it actually did, and perhaps this is a case of a lot of regulatory changes that you sort of maybe think the worst, and actually people do adapt to it.
Yeah, definitely. But I do think for any industry where the government's saying, oh yeah, we're going to do a credit card ban, you should just go, yeah, great, thanks, because it'll make your life a lot easier.
I think you're right. I think by the Gambling Commission, it was the consultation on it in the first place was phrased in terms of what, I don't want to put words into their mouth, but it was saying, this must be a bad thing. Surely if people are gambling on credit, they must be gambling money they can't necessarily afford. So, as you say, emotional, as in this sounds like it must be a bad thing for people, so let's do it. And then we'll have a look at it later and see whether it actually was. And then, of course, they look at it later and see it's not made much difference.
It's no different to somebody placing a bet and using their overdraft, is it?
Yeah, and I think there are lots of different ways you can be gambling on credit, as you say, or you could just use your debit card for gambling and then you use your credit card to pay for the shopping because your account's now empty. I mean, it all comes to the same thing.
Lots of different things. But I would like to point out, it's a shame that Fintan's not here, because he would have just seen a guest agree with me.
Does that not happen very often? Well, let's think of a topic we can argue about then.
It should be easy.
The other thing maybe that's, I don't know if you think it's of interest to your audience, is the increased gaming machines for land-based casinos seems to be almost certainly going ahead in July.
Yeah, see, I do think that's interesting, and it's kind of, so going back to the 2005 Act and the way that was originally structured with different size casino licenses, right?
Yeah.
That would have been in place largely for decades if that had gone through, before Gordon Brown became Prime Minister. And for anybody not familiar with that, Gordon Brown was Chancellor of the Exchequer, followed Tony Blair into the Prime Minister's office, but Brown was, this is weird, I seem to be the only person that knew this at the time, but I knew that the Act was going to change because Brown was very famously Presbyterian, if I remember correctly. And it was a big influence on his sort of moral and ethical thinking.
Okay, yes, yeah, because we lost the regional casino. That was probably the big change. It would have been interesting to see how that actually did. Like, would it have been successful? I don't know.
Well, the super casino idea was so flawed. It was just unreal. I mean, it was just.
Was it, a Vegas-style casino in Blackpool, potentially?
Well, no, Blackpool made sense.
But then,
because Blackpool historically is a tourist destination, and it has, for the last couple of decades, been quite a depressed area. And you've got a lot of people there who want jobs. You've got the training college in the Fylde right next door. You know, there's a lot of good reasons. But East Manchester, I don't think there are any good reasons other than it would have been great to get some investment into the area. But it's that thing of being a destination where I think that's actually quite important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and certainly some of the areas that they chose for the small casinos in particular, I think was the government thinking, build it and they'll come. I don't know, but nobody's going to open a casino where there's not, clearly already a market and a demand for that type of thing. Then.
Well, you've got to. I mean, like the casino that's at the NEC. Like, why doesn't anybody ever phone me up and ask me my thoughts on this? It's like, yeah, you've got a staggering footfall into the NEC, and they all bugger off by 5 or 6 o'clock. And the market around the NEC is, I mean, it's an extremely deprived area. It's almost to the point, and I speak as somebody that grew up in an area exactly like that. It's almost comically deprived. If I described what life is like there, you'd think I was taking the piss. And that's your local market. Good luck with that. So what are the machines going up to?
Yeah, so I think it is a bit confusing. So I don't know if it might be helpful to just talk about what's actually changing for some of the casinos. So the small casinos now, do you know, the last time I looked, there was only 3 of them were actually operational. I don't know if you know of any changes to that, but I think the big problem with the idea of the small casinos was that you needed so many live gaming tables because you had to have this 2-to-1 machine to table ratio. So if you wanted the 80 gaming machines, you had to have 40 live gaming tables, and there just wasn't the demand to use those. So I think it's particularly good for the small casinos that they're now going to 5-to-1, so they can have those 80 machines with a lot fewer live gaming tables, and they don't need such a big area now of the casino devoted to table gaming as well. That reduces from 500 to 250 square meters. So that, I think, will make the small casinos a lot more commercially viable. So potentially there might be some interest in actually opening up some of the other licenses for them. So the large casinos, there's not much changing with the large casinos, other than they have made a change to what qualifies as a live gaming table position for the purpose of the 5-to-1 machine to table ratio. So you can't now include those sort of semi-automated positions. You can only include gaming tables which are operated by an actual staff member, by a croupier.
Okay.
So that's maybe a slight negative for that. Where I guess more confusing is for all of the majority of casinos which have these converted 1968 Act licenses.
Yeah.
So they will now be split into 3 different categories of converted casino. So the first one of those is called other converted casinos. They're really well named, these categories, by the way. So the other converted casinos are all of those whose gaming area is less than 200 square meters. So there's no change for those other than they can now offer betting. Also, they will be able to from 22nd of July if the legislation goes through. I should just clarify that. And also, this is just England and Wales, not Scotland. So with those qualifications, they can offer up to 16 self-service betting terminals. But if they want to have terminals, they probably will need to get a betting operating license and a remote betting operating license from the Gambling Commission. So that's the other converted casinos. Now, if they have or want to increase their gambling area to more than 200 square meters, if they have the capacity to do that, then they have to choose between being a larger converted casino or an extended converted casino. So they're just automatic. If they've got more than the 200 square meters, they're automatically a larger converted casino. They then have to make sure that their gambling area stays below 1,500 square meters. But what they can do is immediately start offering, again, these self-service betting terminals if they want to, if they get the right betting licenses from the Gambling Commission. And this is sort of on a sliding scale based on their gambling area, and it goes up from 60 to 40.
When you say self-service betting terminal, are we talking VLT or FOBT or what? Is that defined?
So this is it's a terminal where you can place a bet on a real kind of sporting event. So it's not a FOBT.
Okay.
Okay, and then once you're a larger converted casino, you can choose if you want to become an extended converted casino, and this is where you start being able to offer more gaming machines. So you get the betting straight away. But now, if you have a gambling area of 280 square meters or more, you can apply to your local authority. You're going to need to vary the plan attached to your premises to show now your table gaming area, your non-gambling areas, all the things that small casinos need to show on their plans. And you have to comply with various rules now about having certain non-gambling areas and certain table gaming. I won't go into all the details because it's a bit boring. But what this means is that you can now, on a sliding scale again, start offering more gaming machines up to the 80 that the small casino can have. But you've got to comply with the same 5-to-1 machine to table ratio as the small and large casinos now. So it depends. So with each additional 20 square meters of gambling area, you can have another 5 gaming machines up to a total of 80.
Where does the 5-to-1 ratio come from?
So this was initially brought in with the large and the small casinos. So the large casinos had a 5-to-1 machine to table ratio, and the small had the 2-to-1 machine to table ratio. And it's really just to try and make there be a balance of facilities. So you're not just allowing a casino that's just banks of gaming machines. So you're trying to sort of have a balance and have some table games there as well.
Yeah, I'm just curious as to where that number was plucked from.
I don't know where they.
I think it's really interesting. So if you think of the ratios in almost any other country, I'm not sure that there are ratios. There's just a cap.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if any other countries have ratios in the same way. But yeah, you're right. If you go to a casino in Vegas, there is just rows and rows of gaming machines.
But even the small ones.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think what the government wanted initially, and I suppose they still want, is a casino, not just to be somewhere where you go and play gaming machines. That there are staff members present, and it's more of a sort of a balanced entertainment facility. So yeah, kind of in a nutshell, that's where we are. And the main thing will be for these slightly larger of the converted casino licenses need to make some decisions about, do we want to start offering more gaming machines, having to then sort of take on requirements for having non-gambling areas and so on, which I assume they will.
I know this is probably going to sound like a stupid question, but couldn't somebody just stick some table games in some dark, dusty corner and never open them, and just have more slots?
They have to be open, so they have to be available for someone to come and play.
Yeah, well, in theory they
are.
are.
A staff member, but yeah, like what had been happening in the small casinos, as I understand it, is that they would have to open the tables and have the staff member there in order to then offer the machines, but they weren't actually being used. So yeah, there probably were some. I don't know to what extent they were in a dark dusty corner, but
so they could. Are you saying, does that mean that they would only be able to offer the machines when the table is staffed?
Yes, I think. Well, yeah, I think that's right.
Wow.
I haven't got that wrong, but yes, so they had to have the table available.
Because there's a lot of well, like the one I was saying at the NEC, which I'm not even sure if it's still open. But last time I was in there, there was, I think, one manned table.
Right. Okay.
And admittedly, middle of the week, and it was a really, really quiet night. I don't think there was anything on at the NEC, or if there was, it was a fitness-based thing.
Remind me, is that one, is that a converted, or maybe you don't know, I'm not sure if that's a converted or one of the...
It's not a 68. It's not a 68 one. It was built post...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's built post 2005. But in terms of gaming area, I would say it's probably, it would fit in under 200 square meters.
Okay.
But because it was built and opened post 2005, it comes under the new licenses, right?
Not necessarily. So it could have been.
Of course, it's not straightforward.
Yeah, I think potentially from what you're saying, it may not be one of the new licenses, but I'd have to check. But
there wasn't a casino there previously.
No, so with the 1968 Act licenses, you can move them to a different premises as long as it's within the same licensing authority area. So, yeah, as I said, I'd have to look up its history, but it may have been another license that was then sort of ported.
Well, there have been a couple of closures in Birmingham, so it could have been.
Yeah, that could be what happened. So, yeah.
Okay.
As we've discovered, as we discussed it, it's all been a bit of a mess. And it's now more confusing, I'd say, with converted casinos being three different, oddly named categories. But at least some casinos will now be able to, I'd say, be more commercially viable by offering more gaming machines, because that's what the people want to play on.
Anybody listening to this outside the UK, you'd be thinking, oh, maybe there's a bit of a market there. But in terms of suppliers, the UK market is covered by basically 3 or 4 suppliers. Yeah. That's it. You could have a gaming show in a broom cupboard.
Yeah.
Sorry?
There are a few independent operators, but yeah, there are sort of some names.
No, I'm talking in terms of equipment suppliers, actual slot suppliers.
Yeah.
There's almost every machine in the UK is Novomatic, Aristocrat, or IGT. There's a few. I think it's Franco. There's probably going to be a few Zetro, but we're not talking a lot of machines. But yeah, the market has been dominated traditionally by those guys. So maybe this is an opportunity for somebody like a Zetro, a creative, medium-sized company, to come in and show something really sexy. I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully it will lead to maybe a bit more diversity in what's available.
Super. Well, Mel, I'm going to wrap that up there. One last thing before we go, though. I'm not going to ask you about Cobra Kai. Obviously, we've talked about that in the past.
Still haven't watched that yet.
So you haven't been to the cinema to see the recent Karate Kid Legends film?
No, I'm afraid I have not.
So I went to see it the other day.
Is it good?
Yeah, it kind of did everything you would expect it to do, Kid gets beaten up a bit, returns triumphant kind of thing. Do you remember the show Dawson's Creek?
Yes, of course I do. Yeah.
Okay, so Pacey from Dawson's, Joshua Jackson,
Yeah.
is in it,
Oh,
and
wow.
hasn't he turned out well?
Has he? Okay.
Yes, very handsome, beautiful voice.
Gosh, Dawson's Creek, that was a good show. And when was that? The 90s? Must have been the 90s.
Let me think. I was drunk, so
Could have been late 90s, maybe.
there's a 30-year period it could fit into. No, it would have been. So I remember when I first started watching it, I was living in Exeter the first time I lived in Exeter, so it would have been 97, 98, around there. And yeah, it was a great show. But anyway, Mel, thank you for joining us. Fintan does send his apologies. He did think he would be here for the recording today. But you know what he's like, his executive lifestyle. Do you know what I mean? I think he does this so that if anybody that he's working with hears the podcast, they just assume he's just so really busy all the time.
Yeah.
I think he's probably sitting by a pool smoking a big fat cigar.
I hope he's enjoying himself.
So anyway, Fintan, Mel says hello. I don't know why I'm saying that. He's not listening.
Good. Well, I hope this was useful, maybe informative for some of your listeners, at least, if not Fintan.
Educational, Mel. Thank you. If you've enjoyed this episode of the Gambling Files podcast, please find us on LinkedIn. Give us a big, juicy, succulent like. That nearly went wrong. You can find us under the name The Gambling Files Podcast. You can find us on Twitter under The Gambling Files. I think the handle is just @GamblingFiles. You can connect to myself, John Bruford, or Fintan Costello, also on LinkedIn. We're also both on Twitter. And you can find all of our previous episodes at www.thegamblingfiles.com. If you enjoyed it, please share. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your colleagues, and we'll see you next time.